check in on Saturday and not. Oh,
There we go.
Well, now it's recording.
oh, oh no. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
It wasn't recording this whole time?
I thought it was. Maybe I think it was. There was just going to be a second part, but go ahead.
Oh, all I was going to do is make a funny comment. I'm going to check in on Saturday and not leave until the following Saturday. That's all.
Fantastic.
It's a lot to do.
Did you want to share what you meant there, what you're doing?
What?
I didn't know if you wanted to share what you meant by that and what you're doing, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I'm coming to see you on Saturday and I'm so excited.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really excited and I'm grateful. So I can't wait.
Great.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
David, I have a comment / question.
All right. Who's the questionnaire?
This is Darren.
Oh, Darren.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think one thing to like pose as a question to you and Shelley, which is the experience of taking a substance to replace other substances can often be confusing for participants who are, learning about this space. Can you and Shelley talk a little bit about how psilocybin is different from other medications that may replace other medications? Does that make sense?
Oh, it's a great question. It's actually a very common question. I thank you for raising it. Do you want me to?
Sure. You can start.
One, we find that with most external substances, whether it is a type of pharmaceutical or even sometimes these types of plant medicines that we use in not the healthiest way, again, we're using them in that way to check out, not check in. But we really feel this is about getting to the root of the issue and not about trying to cover up symptoms. And we feel like that's what we see a lot in allopathic medicine, whether it's an SSRI or other types of medications that are trying to silence the ailment, as opposed to this is showing, like we said, that mirror in front of you to help you really look at that you have the power within yourself to heal. And it gives you new tools in your toolbox to be able to access when we're not using this type of therapy, when we're these are kind of our training wheels for a little bit until we learn to create new pathways and new patterns and new habits, that now we have these tools to access when we are not using this type of medicine and therapy. So, David and I worked with this for a long time, every day, nearly for about 1.5 years, just to see what it would do for us. And it did continue to benefit us, but there wasn't this need. It became more of a choice. Kind of like, you can choose to eat a salad every day, but I don't need a salad every day. I'm not addicted to it. It was more like, I really enjoy the way it helps me look at my things and take ownership for it. But again, we see people, their addictions lessen through this type of therapy because now, again, you have those new tools to access as you continue through your lifetime.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think it should be a supplement for talk therapy. Mm-hmm. The big difference I find in this field of work, especially in the psychedelic psychotherapy work, is that the sitters, and that's what Shelley and I will sometimes call ourselves, sitters or psychedelic assistant, facilitator or therapist, mm-hmm. They've actually done the medicine. So, we know the mechanism of it, how it works in our bodies. And even though our bodies are slightly different, we understand the timing of it, how it affects it. So we can give a detailed report to a participant because we've actually experienced it and we know how it works inside of our bodies. The difference between that and the allopathic medicine model, and for those that didn't know this or out there, I used to work in medical device sales for a long time. I used to go into doctors' offices and sell them a product that I've never actually experienced before. It's just a product that I heard anecdotal evidence about, and so I would repeat that evidence to the doctor. And funny, I actually sat with a doctor the other day for lunch, and he said, those devices you were selling us, we had to take them out about 2 years after we implanted them. So I'm like, okay, great. Not the best model. But the truth is that in the modern medical practice is that, if you asked a doctor if they've ever taken the medications that they have prescribed, most of them will probably say no. If you asked them how it felt in their body, they would probably say, oh, I don't know. This is what I hear. But there is a huge difference between experiential wisdom, which is the actual practice of taking it and understanding how it navigates and works with your body, versus prescribing something and never actually knowing how it feels. Because other than that, it's just what's the right word? conjecture. It's like, oh, the belief that this is what it's supposed to be doing. I realize that there's lots of studies out there around pharmacological drugs, and I think that there's a space for it. However, the AMA defines something as chronic as anything that lasts longer than 6 weeks. All right. And if I'm chronically on a medication for a long period of time, then I need to look at how that medication is actually treating the symptoms versus actually getting down to the root cause. And like Shelley said, the difference between this is that because there's so much of a psychological piece associated with this work, we want to get down to the root causes psychologically. Yes, we understand that people get into accidents. We understand that bones break and that there's cuts and lacerations and that disease can show up in the body. However, if it's something that's chronic, whether it's generational or hereditary, then we feel it's also very powerful to re-empower ourselves by looking at it like, okay, how is this really affecting me? How's my psychology surrounding this disease that's been in my family affecting me? Am I somehow potentially attracting more of that in my life in some way, shape, or form? And that's certainly not to gaslight a dis-ease. That's just to say, okay, I'm going to take even a deeper look at this besides just, oh, I have a pain here and I don't like that pain there. So I'm going to take something to, make it disappear temporarily until it comes back up again. This is about getting down to the root. It's like if you want to weed your garden, you don't just snap the weed off on the stem. You have to dig down into the roots and pull the roots out if you want that weed to go away.
And my background is actually in holistic health. And I feel even in that realm, we get so fixated on the body. And like for me, for example, working through my own pain and struggle with autoimmune disease, we start chasing the pain. And I think this helps, like David said, get to the root, because if we're not able to get to the root, let's say our pain shows up in our shoulder and we're having an incredible pain here, and we end up getting maybe some type of surgery. If we don't get to this, maybe the emotional connection that is residing deep within our subconscious, it might show up a year or two in your knee, because it's just moving that dis-ease around because we're not getting down. We're just covering up the symptoms and focusing just on the physiological body. So this is digging deeper and really helping us heal fully.
Does that answer your question, Darren?
Yeah, it does. I have a follow-up question. Is that okay? I don't want to take time. I know, David, you've done a lot of research, both you and Shelley, on voltage capacity of the brain, and how there's great research that shows us that voltage is low when people are feeling depressed or not feeling they have passion or feeling like they're kind of stuck in a box, and those who have elated emotional experiences or more balanced emotional attitudes in life tend to have a higher voltage. Can you talk a little bit about how psilocybin helps to increase that kind of thermostat in the body, so to speak, and increase brain capacity, so that one can actually objectively observe their life without feeling trapped?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great question.
Can we get this one? All right, cool. So what we know of the brain is there's, all these different parts. There's the occipital lobe, there's the frontal lobe, there's the prefrontal cortex, there's your hypothalamus. You have all these different parts of the brain. And because of all these different parts of the brain, they all have different functions. Some function on an emotional part. Some function more of in a creative part. Some is more of analytical and logistical. And what we find is that as we start to get closer and closer and closer to the root cause of whatever it may be, there is a somatic release that takes place in the body. Our bodies in itself are one big battery. And the food that we put inside of it, and again, what I mentioned earlier, what we put inside through our eyes and ears, either power up that battery or cause that battery to shut down. And the right dieting, the right foods, things like positive affirmations, things like developing healthier experiences with life, like going out into nature a little bit more and experiencing what nature has to offer, getting outside in natural sunlight versus being indoor all day, cooped up under artificial lights.
And I would add not connecting to fear-based environments, whether that's the news as much, things that are feeding you that type of putting you in that fear-based state.
Yeah, so in our brains, we have this thing called the amygdala. The amygdala is responsible for our fear-based response, and that seems to be a huge collection of energy in that area. And so when we are stuck in a fear-based thought cycle, thought loop, all the energy in our brain is just kind of going to that point. Or it's going to what's called our frontal cortex. The frontal cortex is where we process, our worries and our anxieties about life and
Future tripping. Yeah.
future tripping. Literally, it's on the front part
Yeah.
of your head, away from the central part of your head. And so what happens is all the energy gets dissipated towards that. Now, what we also find is that people that tend to be depressed or anxious also tend to take a lot of shortcuts in their day-to-day life, meaning that they're not making healthy meals for themselves. They're just kind of sitting on the couch, not moving the body around. All of these things are going to disperse energy and have a lower amperage, a lower voltage inside of the body. Versus when we start to power ourselves up with vibrant foods and vibrant podcasts and people in our life too, because let's be honest, some of us might have toxic relationships out there. And if you've ever been around someone who's toxic and is unhealthy, talking negative all the time, talking crap about other people, that's not a healthy growing environment for ourselves either. And we're subject to all of that energy as well too, as that person discharges their thoughts, opinions, and feelings. And we have to remember that the human body is a receptacle, it's a transmitter as well as a receiver. And so all of these things essentially affect the nervous system. And what the psilocybin is doing, or what it appears to be doing, is that it has what is called a serotogenic effect. It breaks down into what's called psilocin. Psilocin is a molecule that looks very similar to serotonin, and it goes into the same little ports or key neurotransmitter spots as where the serotonin would, and it keeps the gates open. So instead of, once we deplete serotonin, the serotonin molecule breaks down and the passage of the electrical current across the nerve channel is no longer there. What psilocybin is doing is keeping that nerve channel open a little bit more, which is helping to increase some of that amperage as well, or excuse me, that voltage as well too. And then when we start to develop healthier coping mechanisms and healthier habits, that starts to also displace functioning from the front part of the brain, and we actually it's honestly, it's like we literally become more centered with our energy, and we start to see that the energy or the micro voltage increases right around the central parietal part of the head. Now in yoga we call that the crown chakra, or the crown of the head, but it seems to be centered more towards this point. Does that help, Darren?
No, it was beautiful. Thank you, David. Last follow-up. You were talking earlier, as we were talking about, substances and replacing, and that was a really beautiful answer. The follow-up to that is, what about those who are taking, things that are, important to them as they age? It could be blood pressure medication or other types of medications that their doctor has recommended that they take. And they would like to also, try out psilocybin, but are concerned maybe about contraindications to mixing. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
There's a portion I'm actually going to go.
We're going to get to that a little bit later.
We're going to actually, I'll pull
Okay.
this
Myself, sorry.
No. I mean, it's an important topic to talk about under this, because there are some contraindications, but not as many as we would think. We do find that it helps a majority of actually helping. We can talk about it anyways. The slide isn't here anymore, but for example, we see a huge reduction in blood pressure in a healthy way, normalizing blood pressure. We see a whole range of benefits where people are naturally, organically going off their medications, but it's important to stay in contact with your physician and checking your levels to make sure that you are at a place to reduce this. Now, we do find a huge benefit in helping people get off their SSRIs, but it can be a process and it has to go slow. It can help with less withdrawals and maybe a slightly shorter titration, but it's something that we have to be patient with as we develop new habits to be able to slowly wean off of that. But really, our big contraindications that we really screen for is schizophrenia, and any type of schizoaffective disorder, as well as some bipolar, one specifically. Now, this can be taken as a case-by-case basis. There's some people that can be suitable for this type of therapy, especially if we start more in a micro dosage and slowly work our way up. If they have an experience some in the past with psychedelics and they did not have a type of mania that rose from that experience, that's the one thing that we're trying to avoid, then sometimes we will consider working with those types of people. But that's kind of the main contraindications that we
Yeah. And the thing is too, so let's give an example. If we know someone has high blood pressure, and they are interested in journey work, we're going to take some time with them. We're going to want to switch some things around first. Like, let's look at your diet. Let's look at, what you're intaking that may be contributing to some of that. Let's look at your overall lifestyle. Are you getting exercise? I feel there has to be some level of screening around that aspect of daily lifestyle to understand where they're starting from. And then what our suggestion is first start off with a microdose where you're only using a very small amount. And I'm just going to pull this slide up so people can see, but start off with a micro amount. Micro amounts not going to do too much.
But what I think micro amounts do is that these habits that we want to change, I'm sure all of us have had the experience in our lifetime. We're like, I'll start on Monday, no matter what it is. I'll start on Monday. And we put it off, right? We get to Monday and we make another excuse why we don't want to change that habit or behavior. And this creates, when we start microdosing, kind of organically helps us find this motivation, because again, we're decoupling from our thoughts, we're releasing some old patterns to now where we kind of find it less intimidating to change those habits and behaviors. So now we'll find clients that all of a sudden they want to change their diet out of nowhere and they weren't even considering that before, or they want to leave a bad relationship, or they want to ask for a raise at their job because now they have this confidence to change these habits. And so that's why we really like the model of starting with microdosing for almost everybody, because it helps create the patterns to work towards if they choose to do a macros sit. We like starting with microdosing for a while, coaching around habits, helping them journal, really digging deep into what are the traumas and behaviors and conditionings that are holding them back, and then work towards a big goal if their goal is macrodosing, to really reset the body. And then after that, to integrate with more microdosing. We find this model of microdosing to macrodosing to microdosing works really well for the majority of people. And again, that beginning portion, microdosing, can be longer for some people. Again, if they are on a ton of medications, it's going to be a slower process before we can work towards a higher dosage.
And I'll share, Darren, for your question, we've seen clients across the board. We've seen clients on blood pressure meds. We've seen clients on statins. We've seen clients on diabetic medication, on chronic pain medication, and opiates. And the thing is I saw a great slide about this, and it had to do with teaching doctors more empathy in med school. Is that when you go into a doctor's office, like, let's maybe just go over what that looks like. For a lot of people, they wait an hour in a waiting room. If they're lucky, it's a lot less. But for most people, it's that. And they really only get about 15 to 20 minutes with a person. And then they're given a prescription and, given some basic understanding about the prescription. But there's no journaling. There's no intention setting. There's none of that. And then there's a call me back if the medication doesn't work and we'll try something else. This is very different. And this is a lot more hands-on. And we find that with more hands-on coaching, like I guarantee you, if doctors did more coaching with their clients and had more space for that in their practices, there would be a lot more healing. Because to give someone something and say, just take one of these and go home, that's not very helpful. That's not going to help them grow. But to do check-ins and say, hey, are you changing this? Are you looking at this? That's where we're going to see an acceleration in the overall overcoming of the disease. So, the only thing that we have seen that where we don't touch is like if someone's on lithium, which they typically give to a schizophrenic patient. Klonopin can be a tricky one. If they're on morphine, that's a very tricky one too. And the other issue is that when you stack a lot of drugs, especially, I'll go back to this last slide here, Zoloft, Wellbutrin, Lexapro, all of those SSRIs and antidepressants, what they end up doing is they end up blocking some of the channels. So an individual actually has to take a significant amount more of psilocybin to feel the effects of it because those other things are getting in the way. But what's nice is in the titration process is you can, and it's all citizen science here, but you can slowly titrate a patient down or client down, but they have to do it slowly. You know, if someone's been on Zoloft or Wellbutrin for,
10, 15, 20 years, we get 20 years. Yeah, sometimes.
Then we have to be realistic with them and say, hey, this is going to be at least a 6-month commitment because you've been on this so long, your body is accustomed to it, and it takes a long time for the body to be able to rebuild itself, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. Where we can sometimes get lost in this is when we start to use phrases like, I'm too old, and, my body can't heal itself, or, it's past repair, like all of these things. And people say these things themselves all the time. Remember that our bodies are made of trillions of cells. All these trillions of cells are consciousness all working together. We live in the body. It responds to every single thought that we have. And if we're having negative thoughts about our bodies, the body's going to feel that, and it's not going to feel good. And our behaviors are going to reflect that talk track. Does that answer?
I would say the majority of people that we work with that are on SSRIs, and we get a lot of people because they've gotten to this point where they aren't seeing the benefits anymore, and we're having all these side effects because, for example, it completely destroys the gut. And then we have all these other symptoms that start showing up, and people start to realize there has to be another way. So we get a lot of people that come to us on SSRIs, and I would say the average would probably be about 3 to 4 months. Now, again, if somebody's been on it for a really long time, that could be more like 6 months. But we see it's definitely possible, and we've witnessed that firsthand. Now, I will say Adderall is probably the easiest one. We can almost swap it a 1-for-1, but it's something we have to work closely with people once they start the therapy.
Hope that helps, Darren.
I don't know if we want to go over briefly just dosages, because sometimes we don't really understand really how much a microdose is versus a macrodose. Now, when David and I typically sit with people, we facilitate a lot of macrodose experiences, and we tend to stay within the about 2 grams to 5 gram range. You see here between a moderate to heroic dose. We don't tend to work much beyond the 5 gram range just because we feel the majority of people can get an incredible amount of benefit within that range. And we dose people specific to a lot of different determining factors: their diet, their lifestyle, their history, their sensitivities. We kind of go through a whole questionnaire and consultation just around dosing. And it really has less to do with body weight and height than you would think. So we stay within that 2 to 5 gram range for a macro experience. Now, those macro experiences tend to be about 6 hours. Some a little less if possible, but that's 6 hours of really having a reset on the body. As you see here, sometimes you'll experience that type of ego death, a separation from body. Will have some, a loss of time, where time is not even, it's a different plane, where 5 minutes can feel like 2 hours and 2 hours can feel like 5 minutes. More of that hallucinatory kind of 3D visuals we'll see within that 2 to 5 gram dosage. And again, this is really about resetting the body and having a big breakthrough. Now, under that, when we go below the 2 grams, I would say between the 0.2 to about 2 grams, this would be like a mini macro. This is where you might not have as many strong visuals. You're going to have some breakthroughs. You're going to feel something. It's going to be still a body feel and a mental feel, where it's not something you really want to go out and go about your normal day, maybe not go to work or anything like that, between the 0.2 to 2 grams, but still it's not going to be something where you have as much of an ego death experience. Below that 0.2, this is where you're more working with the microdosing. So again, this is 0.1 to 0.2 of a whole gram. And this is where we tend to work with. We actually work at about 100 milligrams when we work with our clients in a microdose experience. Now, at this dosage at about 100 grams, you're looking for sub-perceptual, sub-threshold. We're not looking to feel high. If you are, then it's something we need to adjust. But typically most people don't feel that high feeling. It's more of an openness. It's more of a connectivity. It's more of a, like we said, less judgment on self and more compassion for self, and really watching our thoughts. And so that's something that you can actually incorporate into your daily practice and go about and do everything you would normally do. And most of the time we feel efficiency actually goes up. So whether it's efficiency with your work or efficiency with your family, you tend to be more engaged and show up more and be more positive and more joyful. And so that microdosing, again, is meant to be something where you have no restrictions on your day-to-day experience.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I want to talk about something here. When an individual, so the big thing why a lot of individuals don't want or don't go and do a macro dose is because of the fear, because they may have heard a story about someone losing their mind, or because they heard, they think of it as how the 60s and 70s was, and all of a sudden they're going to be airy fairy dancing around with their pants off or something like that. I mean, all these are things that are contrived in the heads, but the truth is when you're with a good sitter and there's the right set and setting, then it's in a controlled environment. And in a controlled environment, everything is safe and everything is okay. And there's this little thing over here called the ego death. Now, the ego death, I feel, is a very valuable process in this. And I'm just going to share from this book because it talks a little bit about it. But the ego death is not your actual physical body death, nor is it a death of the healthy ego. It's an experience of letting go of the rigid identifications with your body, mind, biographical story, and the concepts you have used to define yourself. And so what happens is in an ego death, we start to see that it's going to feel almost like the world in the actual journey portion of it. It's going to feel like the world's just kind of falling apart. And who am I without all of these things? And when we go to that space, and I've been there many a times because I've just had to go through my own stuff, what we see is that, you know what? I'm here and I've been here all along, and I'm fine without this identification. I'm healthy and I'm okay. And that fear that I have was just a fear, but that fear is not me. I was perhaps born into a world where that fear exists, but that doesn't mean that I have to live by that fear. And the more that we start to see that these rigid identities that I have, like David, the captain in the Air Force, or David, the medical device rep, or David, the yoga teacher, and all these things, all those labels and titles come with a lot of excess stuff with it. And there's ego in all of that. And when we have an ego death, the parts of us that we don't need is what falls away. And our true self is what begins to show itself after all of that. And if you've never really experienced your true self, all I can say is that it's incredibly loving, it's compassionate, it's understanding, it's accepting, it sees that it's humbling, and it sees that it's another human being having another human experience. And all it really wants to do is be seen and heard and try to help others in the same way.
Were you going to read something here?
No, I'd already read it.
Okay. I was just going to share, because we have a lot of people that come to us that are very anxious about doing a macro set, like David said. And that's why lots of times we start people on more of a microdosing, because we find that over time, a lot of people all of a sudden have this calling to sit with more medicine because it's developing a relationship with something new. We like to say that this is something you have to get to know really, really well. And maybe that's starting off in small amounts. And I always say it's like dating somebody new. Spend a lot of time with it, get to know it really well, create space to really understand what it is doing in your body and what it's bringing up and what emotions you're feeling and what new thought patterns you're feeling. And as you begin to trust it and not distrust it, because a lot of people come in not trusting and being a little worried of how you're going to react to it. You begin to trust what it's doing with you, and it is your ally and not your enemy in this lifetime. Then there's this organic, like, I think I could sit with a little bit higher dose of medicine. And so that's why we love this model of microdosing to macrodosing.
Mm-hmm. And also the people that are perhaps afraid, we don't have to start them off all the way at a 5 gram journey. We can start them over at the microdosing, like Shelley talked about, and then maybe we do a museum dose where there's, you know, get a little bit more lucidity and a little bit more connection to body, and, you know, and we can slowly step them up that way. I'm going to pause here and stop share for just a moment.
Yeah, so any questions around microdosing versus macrodosing?
Where's the... There we go. There we go. Any other questions? Anybody?
Yeah, I heard you mentioned swapping the psilocybin out with that, or Adderall out with psilocybin's relatively easy compared to the others on that list. I'm just curious why that is. I found it very difficult to get off of Adderall, which is definitely something I'm motivated to do.
Yeah.
But it's just such like a crutch for me right now, trying to focus, finding a job, and just, you know, it's been a difficult road. So just curious why that is.
So with ADHD, from our understanding of it and from the literature I've read around it, because I have a bit of an ADHD brain too, Shelley can vouch for that, is that with ADHD, it's very hard to focus. We're just jumping around. And what this is doing, I'll talk both micro and macro. At a micro level, what it's doing is it's helping to just make that noise that's going on, that jumping, that anxiety, be a little bit quieter, for there to be a little bit sharper focus, which is exactly what Adderall is doing, except Adderall is meth, and it's a form of meth. It has a methylated head on it, versus psilocybin is just keeping the channels open throughout the pathway, the nerve pathway. Now, what happens at more of a macro dose with ADHD is that when you light your brain up with all of this psilocin, when it's broken down, it turns into psilocin. Now you're lighting up almost every single pathway in your brain. And as a result of that, all of these connections are taking place at once. Once that starts to slowly die down, what it appears to be is that the pathways that serve you the most are the ones that stay intact. Because once you start to see, and I'm not going to share your past, David. You can do that if you want, but I don't think you've taken like a macro dose of mushrooms, have you?
Yeah, I have, but I was at a music festival, so I don't know if it really applies here.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, fair enough.
Were you able to enjoy the music festival?
Absolutely.
We're able to focus.
And I will say, afterwards, coming home or going back to Airbnb, I noticed that I was like still the mellowed out effects of it. I can see what you're talking about with the cleared pathways, because
that quiets the mind.
I was having some great conversations with people after the tripping part of it.
It elevates everything up. You plateau, but it doesn't just drop you off. It's just a slow and steady. And what we find is in that plateau, in a therapeutic setting, in that plateau is where you get to do the work. And as the psilocybin starts to slowly break down, as psilocin starts to break down in the body and starts to dissipate, that's where all that work that we did in the actual macro dose can start to apply. Okay, these are the pathways, these are the new behaviors that I'm going to start working on. I can see where maybe there were some blockages. I can see where, because sometimes in a macro dose, when you're in a therapeutic setting, it can send you back to a childhood trauma. And that's what people get scared of too, is because they've identified themselves as their past. This person, I'm David, I'm 43 years old, I'm still identifying as the hurt 12-year-old or the hurt 10-year-old or the hurt 5-year-old. Psilocybin helps us go back to those spaces if we have an intention put towards that, help us look at that with a little bit more compassion and understanding. And if I could be in that 5-year-old or 10-year-old or 12-year-old body again, how would I take care of that 5-year-old? How would I make that 10-year-old or 12-year-old feel nurtured and loved again? This is psychotherapy, and it goes beyond just, oh, I took this thing and then I just let it go. It's like, no, I'm going to relearn and retool myself in such a way that I'm going to approach life with more love, as if I could love that parts of myself that weren't loved at the time that the trauma took place. So when we're working with folks that have ADHD or OCD, what we'll do ahead of time is have some really strong intention setting ahead of time. We will sit with them to focus on, okay, these are your intentions. These were some traumatic events that took place. Let's perhaps go into that space, and you're free to explore that all you want, while we're here to facilitate. What Shelley and I do is we facilitate music in that. And we hold that space for about 3 hours. And then once the individuals had some time and have passed their peak point, and usually the 2 and the 2.5 hour points, the peak point of the medicine, that's when they start to come down. And then you can start to work into conversation. And when we start to work into conversation, it's never to put things into people's heads. It's to be as fact mental as possible. It's to recall as much as possible and to help process what may have came up in the most loving space possible.
Yeah, because you tend to be the most vulnerable during that time period, but in a way that's less threatening. You're more open to look at these things past that peak. That's why it's a great space to have some talk therapy, or to have some sort of accountability or a trusted guide to be able to make the best opportunity out of that. Because yes, you can take this and go in a recreational setting and have a great time, but you're missing out on the opportunity that this can do for you, the therapy and the power this can do for you. And that's why, I don't know if we're going to talk some more about set and setting, but how our mindset is so, so important, because we like to say this medicine has really big ears. And the more that you can be, the clearer you can be with your intentions, the more powerful it is. And what you want to dive deep and be really vulnerable about that, because it will come to the surface and it will help guide your journey to bring some healing. But we have to be willing to look at those things.
And I will say this too, for those out there that, we recognize the legalities around psilocybin, but there are things like ketamine out there. I think that you can approach your ketamine sessions, if anyone's out there doing that, you can approach it the same way, but have very firm intentions behind it. And if we were to look honestly at ADHD develops by a whole lot of different things. Sometimes it is not that this is you, David, but sometimes it can develop from dysfunctional households. Sometimes it can be from a bipolar parent, or a parent that didn't know how to manage their stress well. Sometimes ADHD can develop because the mother's on one frequency and the father's on another frequency, and you're hearing different, voices, and like, which way do I go? So you get this tug and pull. Sometimes with ADHD too, if you played sports growing up, or maybe we're involved in athleticism, we're involved a lot of like mental, like just focus in general, we can sometimes see ADHD develop in that area too. None of it's right or wrong. We don't ever, Shelley and I never want to look at a dis-ease as bad. In fact, we try to pronounce dis-ease as a dis-ease or uneasiness in life, because the moment we pronounce it as disease, it's like, it becomes internalized. But if I say, I have a dis-ease with my body, then okay, well, let's work through that dis-ease. What is that dis-ease really all about? And if you look at different organs in the body and look at the body more metaphorically, as opposed to just biologically and anatomy, which I think is important and valuable. My background's in biochemistry. But I think if we look at the body metaphorically for what it's doing for us to have this experience in life, we can start to break things down a little bit more easily too. The lungs take in life, all right? If I'm feeling sadness, the lungs are going to be impacted by that. The heart's all about love. If I'm struggling with love or compassion, my heart's going to feel that. The liver filtrates things. And if I have a hard time filtering my anger, shame, guilt, apathy, grief, then most likely something's going to develop somewhere in my digestive tract, in my liver, gallbladder, and things like that. The body is analogous for a lot of different things if we choose to make those types of connections. Does that answer your question, David?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Cool.
Awesome.
Any other questions? I know we're past the hour point here, but please feel free to share if you have any questions.
May I ask a question? I couldn't find the hand to raise.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's perfect.
Hi. So could you give us some information about how someone would maybe start working with this? I know you gave us a lot of information already, and I'm mostly asking to educate the people that I'm working with. I know that starting with microdosing from my perspective, it's the safest way. At least I feel safe as someone who's talking to them about, for all the reasons that you've educated me on. And I have a lot of knowledge on how it actually heals our brain, and the healing part, I think, speeds up a lot of our clients' improvements. So, anyways, what would be the steps that we could recommend to them or for them? Like, or they say, well, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? You know, because I'm not going to guide them, you know, there. I'll be sending them to you.
Are you talking about a source in order to start the therapy, or are you talking about the steps you can tell them how to do it and coach them?
No, it's steps that you would be taking with them when I send them to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the first thing we like to do with people is one, get us on a phone call and we can talk to them.
We have a big
in person,
consultation.
And do a consultation to see if they're the right fit for it. And we can get a basic understanding. Most people at that point, if they're looking for outside, then they're willing to be vulnerable and share. We recommend watching 2 shows, Fantastic Fungi. And we recommend watching How to Change Your Mind, episode 2 about psilocybin with Michael Pollan.
They're both on Netflix, by the way.
Yeah. I guess I would educate them about all of that before I send them over and make sure that they're 100% appropriate.
Yeah,
And they have already microdosed.
Yeah.
Oh, they've
For
already.
as long as you recommend they need to. So I guess I'm just thinking about what the next step would be, because that's where I kind of am stuck right now. It's like, what do I tell them?
So if they've been microdosing and then it's moving more towards a macrodose, it would be to, well, a couple different things. One, understanding their habits and behaviors, understanding and their openness and willingness to want to talk about this, what struggles they may have with control, what fears that they may have around it. Because a lot of people, it's like they've already had so much, like how much, okay, I got another therapy appointment, another one and another one. And it's like, it can be very exhausting for people by the time they get to us. So it's about letting them, and we try to be as transparent as possible with it, because it's ultimately about us showing up to serve them. And it's us wanting to know what it is that they want to work towards and work through, so that way we can show up with their best interest in mind and our best hats on in order to be able to provide that service to them.
Yeah, it's creating a deep, trusting relationship, because it is a very vulnerable thing to go through, and people that sometimes are strangers. And so for us, we spend a lot of time diving deep and creating this safe space where they feel like they can let go. And that is being very gentle and very, approaching them with no judgment, knowing that we are all the same, we all have our own stuff. And so we do tend to share some of our own personal things to create that trust.
Absolutely, to create the relationship. Absolutely.
We connect through our vulnerabilities.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that's what we spend a lot of time building up. At least typically for us, it's at least a month that we build up towards a macro sit. And if that's working with microdosing, or it's just us doing coaching with them. But we find that time is necessary to really prep the body and the mind, the spirit, and the trust and the relationship that we invest in with them.
Okay. And I really like I guess some of the things I wanted to know is, you said getting into their control issues and what they want to work on, which in my case, most of them are going to want to work on some trauma that we've already worked on to a point.
Right. Exactly.
But sometimes no matter what we do, their mind will not allow them to open up. I can do EMDR every week, twice a week with them, but I can see when we hit a wall, even like they're protective. It's too strong. And so I think that this would be a great route for some of them who are pretty appropriate for it. And I just wanted to know how to present it to them. And thank you so much.
Yeah, and I would present that there's a more like because this is organic and natural, you can say, there is natural remedies out there that have been used for thousands of years. And I mean, that sometimes pushes people away, because people are so sort of stuck on the Western medicine model. But for some people, once they start doing their research around this, and if they want to do a little bit of homework themselves, they'll see like, okay, wow, this really has been used for hundreds and hundreds of years for healing. I mean,
and there's so much fresh research coming out about how it actually does, help with brain cells and neurotransmitters and stabilizes them. There's just so much.
Right. Now, the biggest challenge that we're finding with research is that they're doing it in very sterile settings. And it's like, we want to try to make it as organic and clean as natural too, and not just a sterile doctor's office setting. Because and that's going to be the true challenge, I think, in the healing process with psilocybin is how do you create an environment that makes a person feel like they are safe and held and not too clinical. Because when you have white lab coats and people coming in and out checking on you, that can be a little bit disruptive. And so it needs to be in a safe space. I mean, we have our studio here where we do it. And if you've ever been in our studio before, it's a very calm place.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, we want it to
immediately you walk in and you just feel it.
Yeah. I think also an important component is making sure they know that the ball is in their court. Meaning, I think a lot of times we go to therapists and stuff, they tell you all these things you're supposed to be doing, as opposed to let them know that we can go at their pace. There's no forcing, there's no rush. And putting the ball in their court empowers them to let them know when they feel like it's the right time, that they can step forward and choose that. And we see that happens organically. All of a sudden they're like, you know what, I think I want to do this. So I think stepping away and allowing them to know that they are in the driver's seat and they have the capacity to be in the driver's seat, and we're just here to hold witness and create a safe space, kind of helps that a little bit.
Yeah, and you're talking about how good therapists would handle their sessions. So exactly, that's what we like to do. So it sounds wonderful. I do know that before I start recommending it more, I never macrodose, so that needs to be something that I should experience before. So I'm not jumping in and sending patients over before I know what it is, but still.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Hey, we'd love to work with you if you want.
Yeah, I'll call you.
We got you.
And so people also understand rules and regulations around this. So because it is considered to be a Schedule 1 DEA drug, it is illegal at the federal level. However, what we are slowly seeing at the state level is that states are slowly loosening their reins around it, and we're starting to see more decriminalization around it, meaning you can gift it, you can grow it, you just can't sell it, which means you can gift it through service, you can gift it through coaching, but you cannot sell it, just flat out sell it. There has to be a component of service behind it. So as we move forward, we are probably going to see in the state of California how that's changed, how that's going to change in 2025. For us in California, it is on Governor Gavin Newsom's desk for signature. There was a 40-11 vote that was in approval of it at the state Senate. So knock on wood, hopefully we can keep moving forward. We are going to see more more talk of this. It's been on the front of Time magazine. You're going to see it more and more in newspapers. I know that pharmaceutical companies are going to posture themselves, and one of the reasons why there's a delay in it at a DEA level is because there's going to be profits in this. And if you can patent a process like synthesizing psilocybin, and there's a couple companies out there like Compass, Psilocybin, I think, is one. There's some Canadian companies that are being currently traded, but there's going to be more rigorous legislation around it as companies see that this is a pathway and gateway in order to be able to do it. But the problem is, it's just going to be a pharma rep going into a doctor's office, and the doctor is going to be prescribing it, and then there's not going to be that hand holding. And the thing is there really should not be, you really should not be giving this out without there being some sort of handhold coaching education behind it. And it needs to be lengthy, not just here, take this because this rep came in here and gave it to me. It needs to be let's have a real sit down consultation and talk about this.
Yeah, we rarely pass off medicine or suggest medicine to people without at least some sort of consultation with us. That's how we are. And David mentioned the laws. We wrap it around our service of education and support. And we find that so important. And we really kind of push away the people that just want to come in and get some medicine, because it kind of disrespects what this is all about. And so we really tried, like, these types of, Zooms. We really want to raise the education around the importance of using this as something to lean into and do the work in order to raise what this is all about, the education of what this is all about, to more of the mainstream society. Because again, we're seeing this everywhere, but are we really making sure that people are using this in a safe, therapeutic way? So,
yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Jeannie. Awesome. Amy, I saw your hand raise.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I hope you. I've got a lab that's not feeling well, so I'm in here. If I have somebody that wants to do a Zoom call with you and they can't get to Los Angeles, let's say they're from Reno and they're interested, can you guys set up a Zoom call and do a?
Yeah,
no problem.
That's
okay.
We do that all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, we do that probably 10 times a week.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure because I think I like your approach, and I think that I went through a bout with depression, and it was hormonal because I was going through menopause and I didn't know I went through late, and I got prescribed medicine, and I don't like the way the doctor treated me, and I have a lady here I want to put you guys in touch with. That's another conversation. I don't want to waste anybody else's time, but she's a light healer.
Okay.
And Omi Thomas. So there's a lot of, I'm glad you guys can do it over Zoom. And I didn't mean to be lying down. I listened to everything.
You're good.
I have a big, almost 14-year-old lab. So.
Hey, we're all about authenticity here. You be what you need to be.
Okay, awesome. I've got a couple people I need to refer to you because I want to work with you guys so we can do it over Zoom. So I'll tell you my experience with this psych whatever hospitals.
Hey, looking forward to it.
Awesome.
All right, cool. All right.
Any other questions? I know it's 7:20 and some people, we have some friends in New Mexico and it's kind of late there. Is there any other questions for today? I mean, we're going to be holding more of these, and some of these we're going to be going over probably stuff you've heard, but there's always new stuff to also talk about too. So is there any other questions for tonight?
Yes.
Yeah, David.
Good.
I just want to comment on Jeannie's question earlier. I just want to say, for what it's worth, I think you're on a great path. I do believe, from a patient perspective, I know what wall you're talking about, the EMDR training, and it's frustrating. And this got me interested in psychedelics. I think it can go to the next level as a assisted tool for therapy, and I could see that being the future of psychiatry therapists.
Yeah.
As far as the process goes, because
Jeannie, you're muted.
Yeah, and
Hold on, Jeannie's trying to talk. She's muted.
Oh no, I just wanted to say thank you for the feedback. It's really nice to know and hear that.
no, absolutely.
And I will say this too about, for those therapists that are out there that are going to maybe lean into this work once legalization does come around. I find that the depths, and I think this applies to all therapies, the depths that we're willing to look at ourselves and get honest with internally is what we're able to show up with as a superpower to help others as they're working through their healing process. Because, Shelley has reminded me of this many times, but when we elevate ourselves and look down on others and we try to heal from a pedestal, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Some stuff is retained, yes, but when we lower ourselves and humble ourselves to look at another human being with empathy, and I believe that medicines like this can help do that, we can start to get on the same page with them. We can lean into their dis-ease a little bit more without trying to save them or fix them. We can remind them that they have it in them to be able to help themselves work through it, and we can provide that loving space and backup and feedback, and basically as therapists be that container where the healing can take place.
And I don't think it's even like a lowering that we do. I think it's more of a understanding that we are all one. We are all the same, going through our own things. And often when we try to put ourselves up here, we're doing it out of fear because we don't want to be seen. And so to let go of that idea that like somehow we have it all figured out, we'll never have it all figured out. We're still learning along the ways. We've been in this for 7 years, and I'm sure we will be studying this for a lifetime because we're so passionate about this topic.
Mhm.
But to say, sometimes we don't know, or we messed up too. And here's our experiences moving through this and how this therapy has helped us. And to know that we're all in the same plane. That's how we heal, like we said, through our vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
Oh, she's like, yeah.
Wendy, did you have any questions?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Oh, is that good? No, I just want to say thank you guys because, David, I've known you for a while and I've just been kind of led back to you. And Shelly, you're stunning and I can't wait to meet you. And this thing, I kind of wonder how you guys kind of decompress after taking on so much of other people's energy. I guess that would be my question for you guys. Like, how do you, just, because you can tell you're very invested.
Oh, yeah.
In your people. So
we make love.
TMI, David, TMI. You are newlyweds.
Yeah. So that's a great question. One, it's a constant taking care of our health. If we have very strong, healthy, what we would consider to be healthy diets, we know what this work entails, and we feel that it requires there to be a level of conscientiousness towards maintaining that on a regular basis. So eating healthier on a regular basis for sure. That way we have the energy to be able to do like a 6-hour session with somebody. Mm-hmm. But then just making sure that we're going outside, exercising. We don't try to do too many of these. Like we don't do more than one a week.
Sometimes two.
Sometimes we'll do two, but that's a lot.
But we're already coaching people through micro experiences every day, numerous tons of people. So that takes up a lot of investment and time, but it's usually working towards a macro set. So again, we'll only book those macros once or twice a week. But for us, it's really having healthy boundaries, really understanding, when something is affecting us too much and creating that space where we're not taking on too much. We can create space to still do our own work. David and I go on almost a nightly walk together where we're kind of like, okay, what is it that was brought up today? What are we feeling? What do we need to unravel? Because if we don't look at it, then it just festers and it ferments, right? And so it's making sure we create that space to not just look at everybody else's issues and not address our own, because I think that helps us show up as a whole person.
Yeah.
And having a soundboard, having somebody, whether it's you're not in a romantic relationship, but having a trusted person that can be your accountability to really, where you can let go and surrender and show all of your, dirty laundry too, I think is really important.
Right. And as partners, we're not here to compete against each other either. We're here to lift each other up. So I think that's also just a healthy reminder that if we want to have healthy relationships, we're not here to compete against one another. We're here to support each other as we're working through whatever may arise as we're doing this work. Yeah.
Anything else?
Anybody else? It's almost 7:30.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having this, and I look forward to more. And it's a pleasure to meet you all. Sorry again, I didn't have my video on. It's pitch black here with the power out, so we're glad we have cell service. But yeah, thank you again, you both, and good night to everyone.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for showing up. Any last questions?
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah, Sarah.
Can you speak a little bit about ketamine versus psilocybin?
Sure. Ketamine. So ketamine, you can kind of turn on and off depending on the method in which you are using it. It has a lot shorter half-life to it. So a typical ketamine experience will be, about an hour, 15 minutes to an hour. It'll be typically in a clinical type setting. You'll have a comfortable chair, might have some headphones and listen to, and you have some eyes. You're not going to get the kind of workup that you're going to get for psilocybin though, in the pre-workup area. You are most likely not going to get a lot of interpretation and integration afterwards. Yeah. It's just going through the dissociative experience of what ketamine does. And then, you typically I think there's 6 sessions. That's sort of the recommended, is you do 6 sessions with it. You can get it intramuscular, which is just a shot in the arm. You can do it with a lozenge. Yeah. and through sucking on a lozenge. And then some people get it intravenously where you can turn it on and off. Each one's subtly different. The intramuscular is going to be a, go up high very quickly and then slow come down. The lozenge is going to be more of a bell curve with a plateau to it and a slow taper down. And then the intravenous is just going to be turn off, turn off, turn on, turn off. And versus psilocybin, once you take it, there's no going back. It's all right, I am going to surrender and allow this. And you do the same thing with ketamine too. You surrender, but it's a lot longer surrender. So that would be the biggest difference. Some people will say that they have a ketamine hangover afterwards. We don't see that so much with psilocybin, especially if we've been doing the right dieting and coaching ahead of time to get the body prepared for it, and also do the right eating afterwards.
Again, and I think we just feel in observing the ketamine model that a lot of practitioners are using, there really just is a lack of support in that type of therapy. For some reason, there's just not as much of a, I don't know, an education around that helps from beginning to end, and especially with that integration. And so we have a lot of people that come to us from ketamine that feel like they were missing something, some component of it. It's usually that support and education.
Mm-hmm.
Does it work on a different part of your brain?
No, it's a different type. It's a different affect though, in the brain. It's acting upon a different receptor in the brain, rather than the serotogenic receptors. But it does allow for that disassociation. I do know that it's very hard on the kidneys. So for kidney processing, what they found is long-term use of ketamine actually is not good. And so, if you are interested in it, it's fine to do the 6 rounds or whatever rounds there is. But I think it's also, I know that there's a popularity with it because it's billable to insurance, and anything that's billable to insurance, doctors will climb on board with and go with. And I say this because I used to work at surgery centers, and I used to know the highest billable things, and those were the cases that we used to do as many as we could. So I don't mean to be shrewd like that, but that's just how it was when I was working in the medical world. And that's not a model that I think is sustainable. A lot of people will probably stay away from this type of therapy, mainly because, like right now, for instance, in Oregon, they're billing $3,500 for a 4 to 6 hour sit off of 2.5 grams of mushrooms. That's, with that, you can only do like one a day. You can only see one client a day, and you have to be very good and focused at what you're doing in order to be able to do that. So as far as a sustainable model, it's not sustainable. And the problem, what we're going to see too, is that they're going to be doing these group sessions. And we've done group sessions before, but you start to get what's called transference. And transference is when someone's going through an episode or an experience that they're working on internally, and then you have another person, or you have 10 or 15 other people in a room all listening to that. So now, instead of being inside of their bodies and doing their work, they're being taken out of that work because there's a distraction taking place.
Yeah. And Are we gonna say? Oh,
Go ahead.
Maybe with my own voice. And I was going to say, and also in those group settings, we tend to not feel as safe because we don't know those individuals. And so our ability to be vulnerable is not as plausible. And that's why David and I really focus on more of a catered, customized sit for an individual or couples or sisters or whatever that looks like. So we can really create an experience just for them, where they don't feel judged or feel everybody else's work that they're going through in the room.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. All righty. Any last questions?
No, but with ketamine, I have friends who work at ketamine clinics and they don't have therapists.
Yeah,
I know.
It's
crazy.
It's so hard.
I mean, it's great. It does wonders for people when nothing else works for them. It's great for depression. I know that. So I'm not.
It gives them a break.
No judgment here, but
Gives them a break from their mind. I think that's what it does. It gives them a temporary break from their mind. But I don't feel like that break is long enough, because if you're just in there for an hour and out for an hour, typically you're in there, there's an hour setup, there's an hour of the ketamine, and then there's an hour of coming off the ketamine and going back into your day. Unless
What
there
are you
is,
taking with it? Is it healing you at all in that hour?
and the ketamine's disassociating you from your mind. There's a separation that's occurring. So
it's not necessarily creating new connectivity like psilocybin does. It's all about creating new pathways and connectivity. If you look at it as in nature, it's not doing that when you take ketamine.
And depending on some people's brains, everybody's brain chemistry is different. Some people experience the kaleidoscope effects that a heavy dose does. Some people experience imagery and some of that, what's called synesthesia, which is when all of the different, it's like all of the sensory organs turn on at the same time. So you get this overlap of everything, which can be a little bit, confusing for some people.
Yeah.
But, I'm not as huge of a fan of the synthetics. I mean, I know that ketamine does come from mycelium and is a substrate of mycelium. However, I'm not as big of a fan of it. Mycelium, by the way, for those out there, is part of the network that mushrooms do use, but it's synthesized in order to get it to where it's at. So, yeah, I think it's a good starting point for some people, but I know that with psilocybin or ayahuasca or LSD therapy, MDMA therapy, I feel like you can go a lot deeper. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining our call this evening. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm just going to type in our, let's see, our email address here if you don't have it. And feel free to contact us and connect with us as needed. If you have any referrals, we'd love to talk to them. And yeah, we're here supporting the community, and we really want to raise awareness and bring this therapy up a little bit, because the more that people start talking about it, the more that senators and Congress people will talk about it at the state level as well as at city levels. And we're doing amazing work with veterans right now that are getting tons of benefit out of this. So, and first responders as well too. So we know that there's a path. It's just going to take some time, but it needs voices behind it. And the more that we can get out the positive experience from this, because let's face it, in the last year, there's been only 4 deaths by mushroom, and that's just because of wrong taxonomy. It's not because it was a psilocybin mushroom. Versus last year, there was 140,000 car accident deaths based on alcohol-related deaths, and over 76,000 opiate-related deaths. So I think we have something pretty good going here. Mother Nature made things in a beautiful way for us, and I think by tuning into that a little bit more, we can gain some of the benefits of it. So thank you, everyone, for your time today. I guess we only got maybe a partial recording here, but we got more than enough. So I will send this out for anybody who wants a copy of it. Okay. Thanks, you, everyone.
Guys.
We appreciate
Have a great
you.
evening.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.